2 weeks ago, the Senate passed a bipartisan bill. We hope now that the House will act again in a bipartisan way. In that spirit, I sent a letter to Speaker Boehner today urging bipartisan action to pass comprehensive immigration reform, highlighting the work of the bipartisan task force of 7. We have always moved forward on the principles of our Congressional Hispanic Caucus to secure our borders, protect our workers, unite our families, and provide an earned pathway to citizenship. Each element of this has bipartisan support. Secure our borders. A bill came out of the Homeland Security Committee, McCall, Thompson, Republican and Democrat, with unanimous support on Homeland Security. McCall-Cuellar, Border Communities Economic Security and Sustainability Act. Mr. Cuellar will talk about that. McCall, Republican, Cuellar, Democrat. Cuellar, McCall, Fairnhold, cross-border trade enactment. So it's about border security, but it's also about economic security at the border. And then this, talk about a path of legal permanent status that leads to citizenship. That's in the Senate bill, bipartisan support. So every element that you can name, just about every element you can name, is something that already has bipartisan support or has been initiated by the Republicans. I think there is a path to comprehensive immigration reform. I'm honored to be here with our border caucus, who have brought forth some of the concerns that they have, or some of the ideas that they suggest would be better ideas than some of what we have seen so far. Let's hear it from them. I'm pleased to yield to a very distinguished chair of the border caucus, the gentleman from Arizona, Mr. Grajal.
Thank you very much, Leader Pelosi, and very significant that you joined us today and helped initiate this discussion. The discussion of immigration reform, as the Republicans retreated to their conclave to decide what they're going to do or not do, what their priorities are going to be, Border Caucus feels very strongly, and it's reiterated by the leader, about a pathway to citizenship. But we also feel really strongly that part of the security of our borders has to do with economic security on our borders, has to do with ports of entry that are functional, enhanced trade and commerce, and has to do with full staffing of customs, and my colleagues will talk more in detail about that. I want to talk about one aspect. 5,750 lives have been lost in the last 10 years in the border. I represent 350 miles along the Arizona border, and 2,700 have died in that area. And this year, again, a spike in the number of deaths. So we're asking that part of the consideration needs to be humanitarian support, search and rescue, how to educate and prevent those deaths, targeting human trafficking, all have to be part of border security. The definition of border security has been hijacked to talk just about how many, what armaments, what technology. The Border Caucus feels that the definition for the borderlands of security is expansive. It includes economics, it includes the humanitarian support, and we feel that as we move forward, the Speaker and his caucus have an immense responsibility not only to move a bipartisan bill forward, and many of the elements we'll talk about today are indeed bipartisan, but also, more importantly, to have the temperament and the courage to put something together that will solve this issue for the long term. Not a quick political fix, but a long-term resolution. And part of it includes the agenda of the Border Caucus. With that, let me introduce valued friend, co-chair of the Border Caucus from Texas, Congressman Vela. Sir.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Leader Pelosi and Congressman Grijalva. I represent 550,000 people on the southern border of Texas. My anchor city is the city of Brownsville. My position on the fence, I believe, is well stated. The introduction of additional border fencing is something that to me does not make sense. But one of the reasons is because it doesn't make any economic sense. We have a valuable trading partner with Mexico. You'll see that 6 million United States jobs depend on trade with Mexico. Since 1993 to 2012, trade with Mexico has skyrocketed. Our bilateral goods and services trade has reached an estimated $536 billion in 2012, which is a new record. Mexico has become the United States' third largest trading partner after Canada and China, you will see. And Mexico is our second largest export market in the world. And the other thing is, if you go and evaluate the economic impact of our trade with Mexico on a state-by-state basis, what you see is that in Speaker Boehner's state of Ohio, the total volume of the state of Ohio's trade with the country of Mexico is $4.3 billion. With Whip Cantor's state of Virginia, $1.336 billion. And finally, the state of California, a whopping $59.68 billion. All other arguments about defense aside, just the symbolic nature of constructing more fence along the border of a country with whom we have such great business relationships doesn't make any sense. And with that, I introduce Congressman Beto O'Rourke from our sister city of El Paso.
Thank you. And I want to start by saying that I'm very grateful for the leadership that we have here in the House with Leader Pelosi, the leadership that we saw in a bipartisan manner in the Senate, so that we finally have, after decades, a comprehensive immigration bill with a pathway to citizenship that we can talk about and hopefully improve. And that's why we're here today, is to talk about how we improve this bill. I come from El Paso, Texas, which forms with Ciudad Juarez one half of one of the largest binational communities anywhere in the world. It's an incredibly beautiful place. It's economically vital to the success of this country, and it's amazingly safe by any measure. In fact, El Paso, Texas is the safest city in the United States today. It was the safest city last year. It was the safest city the year before that. San Diego, another border community, is the second safest. Laredo is one of the safest communities as well. So I'm here to say that it's really important to view the border as an opportunity and not a threat. And you wouldn't know that from reading the Corker-Hoven Amendment in the current offering from the Senate in their comprehensive immigration bill. So I want to work cooperatively with my colleagues in the Congress and the House, with those in the Senate if ultimately it comes to conference, to improve this bill so that we make the most out of our opportunities at the border. Congressman Vela showed how much we are dependent on trade with Mexico, on the 6 million jobs that are produced from that trade in the United States, on the billions of dollars of economic activity. If we diverted even a fraction of the $40 billion in the Corker-Hoven Amendment that militarizes the U.S.-Mexico border to facilitating trade and economic growth, we'd create millions more jobs in the United States, billions of dollars more in economic activity. And really, at the end of the day, Republican or Democrat, that's why we're here, to create jobs, to create opportunity, to create economic growth. So I look forward to working with the leadership and, frankly, working with members from both sides of the aisle to improve this, to ensure that we have a bill that is humane, that is rational, and that is fiscally responsible, and that at the end of the day creates jobs, creates opportunity, along with the pathway to citizenship. So look forward to answering any questions that you all might have. And with that, I want to introduce Congressman Cuellar, one of the great representatives of the U.S. side of the U.S.-Mexico border.
Thank you so much, Beto. Thank you for your leadership. First of all, I want to thank Leader Pelosi. Leader Pelosi has traveled the border. She's been in Laredo, El Paso, the Brownsville area, McAllen. She's traveled. She understands that. So we want to thank her for taking the time to go up there, because I always find it interesting. The people that have never been to the border are always the ones that come up with the solutions for the border, and she's been down there, and I appreciate it. The Border Caucus, we're here for one reason. We live in the border, we drink the water, we breathe the air, so I think we should know the border a lot better than some folks that have never been down to the border. Economics. I just got back from Mexico, actually about a week ago. I spent about 3 days in Mexico. I got to sit down with senators and congressmen and business people there in Mexico City. And the first thing they said was, what are you all up to there in the United States? What are you trying to do to us? We're a big trading partner, and as both the folks have mentioned a few minutes ago, think about this. 40% of all the exports from the United States, all the exports from the United States go to Mexico and Latin America, 40% of what we do. Besides the 6 million jobs that we have, every day there's $1.2 billion of trade between the U.S. and Mexico. But the most important thing is to show you how connected we are with the Republic of Mexico as an example. If a product comes in, an import comes from Canada, from China, it will have about 4% American parts. But if you have an import come in from Mexico, it will have 40% American parts. So it tells you how connected we are. The problem that we got to be very careful with is that the border is a very dynamic area. And as mentioned a few minutes ago, if you come up with a single dimension where you say all you need is border patrol and all you need is a fence and that will solve the problem, you're missing the dynamics of the border. For example, right now the federal judges on the border are the ones that have the largest caseload. So if you add more border patrol, you create more cases, and you add to the federal judges' caseload, you're forgetting about adding more federal judges. You forget about adding more prosecutors, more public defenders, U.S. Marshals. You're just adding one dimension. The other thing is, as it was mentioned right now by Raul, is that they're just thinking about the men and women in green, which is Border Patrol. But what about the men and women in blue, which are the CBP officers? 80% plus of all the goods and people that come into the United States come through land ports. And we're not putting the infrastructure, we're not adding the men and women in blue, which is CBP, and we got to think not single dimension, but multi-dimension. Again, one more thing, because I feel very strongly about the fence, like Phil said. The fence is a false sense of security, it really is. And if you look at it, it is a 14th century solution to a 21st century problem that we have. I can see it that if we built this fence, by the way, there's a provision that we got to be careful. It says no fence specifically on the northern border, but on the southern border they want to put more fence. But if you add more fence to the southern border, I can see it one day where a Mexican president will be on the other side of the wall facing the United States and say, like Reagan did years ago, and say, Mr. President, tear down this wall. So we have to make sure that when we talk about border security, that it is sensible, strong border security, and this is why we're here together as members from the border where we live, we drink the water, we breathe the air, and we understand the border better than other folks. Thank you so much, and thank you, Madam Leader.
Appreciate you saying that. It's very interesting to hear the volume of trade that goes back and forth, and one of the reasons we're interested in more infrastructure and more assistance with personnel for facilitating commerce is that it takes time. The more time people have to wait to get in, the more they have to choose other options like flying, which makes the product not competitive. So it's all connected. It's all connected. So if you want to do some things there, if you want infrastructure, have it be infrastructure that facilitates commerce and trade and family unification rather than make it more expensive to trade with Mexico. Yes, ma'am.
For the four gentlemen behind you, could any of you vote for the Senate bill as it currently exists today with those border security provisions, or does that make it so that you can't support it?
Well, why don't we just hold that for when we see what comes out of the House? We have been very, shall we say, bipartisan in saying we want to see what the Speaker comes up with and how he wants to bring it to the floor and the rest. And at the end of the day, there will be a choice to be made. But I'd rather not have our members be placed on a spot that maybe they want to be put on the spot. But I like to keep all options open, my colleagues.
I would agree that the options being open, as the leader said, is important. Is that extra layering of the Corker Amendment? I've called it excessive and overkill. I still believe that's the case. We have a difficult situation here in the House. What is going to come out of this House? What are going to be the ramifications of anything proceeding from here? So keeping one's powder dry as we go forward is probably, for me personally, the wisest step. But like I said, we all have opinions about that extra layer.
It's part of the process. As you know, it's gotta go, it's not final bill, it's part of the process, we gotta go through the process itself.
And I believe, you know, I always support the prerogatives of the House, and I want the House to have a bill that goes to conference where the debate will take place. I think the Senate passing a bill gives leverage to those who want a bill in the House, because the pressure is on them to do something if you want to exercise the prerogatives of the House. So we view it as a positive step in that it has passed. It will be an instrument at conference, but hopefully it'll help us get the best possible bill to go to conference with it.
Madam Leader, could you elaborate on, if you don't mind, could you elaborate on the House Democratic position supporting path to citizenship? Does that mean ahead of conference you would whip against individual bills that don't have a path to citizenship unless you're guaranteed path to citizenship vote? Does that have to happen
Well,
first?
you know what, let's see what the today, the Republicans are meeting at 3 o'clock. We have votes, so we're gonna have to go too. And that is, I hope that they will be hearing from the bipartisan group that has been meeting for a period of time. It is my understanding, but I have no firsthand knowledge of it. It's my understanding that they worked into the night and have a proposal that they will be, perhaps they'll be presenting in whole and in part there. So I'll take this one step at a time, and I've said to the Speaker, however, you know, we want a comprehensive immigration bill. If he wants to bring it in parts, that's his prerogative. We want comprehensive immigration reform at the end of the day to go to the table.
Leader,
Yes.
but you know, Senator Schumer met with your conference or your caucus earlier this week and said that it was a non-starter if this House immigration bill were to come out without a pathway to citizenship. And a lot of the members seem to be saying that a path to legal status would be something that they think could possibly pass through the House. Is that something that a path to legal status, is that something that you think the Democratic caucus could actually support, considering it's not technically a pathway to citizenship?
I think that Senator Schumer's comments reflected the enthusiasm that he saw in the room for a path to permanent legal status, and that's a path to citizenship.
But in terms, how would you react if the bill were to come to the floor and just be a pathway to legal status? I mean,
Well,
so
why
that
don't we take a
Republicans-
look at what they're going to bring to the floor and what they can pass? In other words, at some point, a bill has to pass, whatever it may be. And can they even pass a bill without path to citizenship? Say you take that out, can they pass that bill? So again, we're in a legislative process now. The House works its will. And the question is, can a bill without a path to legalization even pass